I grew up in the system. I've been on some form of supervision since I was 11 years old. And kind of the big picture story here is that I was sentenced to 213 years in federal prison. Mandatory minimum sentences. I was never supposed to be released. Despite that, I chose to hold on to hope that someday I would be awarded a second chance. And I lived every day as if I was eventually going to walk out that door.
From Second Opportunity and U-Turn Health, this is the Path Forward podcast. It's episode 22. Today is kind of special for me in a number of ways. I'm actually in Las Vegas right now for a conference about correctional health care, but being out here, I recognize I haven't been here in more than 25 years and how much it's changed. I also realized that there was a time I was incarcerated. I never imagined my life would be about getting on an airplane and going places. I thought that was never going to happen. And so this is Adam Clausen, and he's my guest today. And I followed him on Facebook when he first got out. He too is formerly incarcerated, and he's kind enough today to have made his way to the Paris hotel where we're sitting so that we can have this conversation. But his story is terrific. He's doing terrific work right now, and I can say just in a little bit, I know him. We met in person in Nashville at a conference several months back, but I think we were involved in a few Zoom calls along the way, and I knew of him, as I said, from Facebook as he first got out and what that journey is like. So, Adam, welcome and thank you.
Thank you for having me. And I love what you pointed out that, we've been on some calls together and finally had this opportunity to connect in person. It's an interesting fraternity of those of us with the lived experience who are in this space and get to connect in person and talk about our experiences.
I was thinking about that as I was walking, come down to meet you, is that I have met so many terrific people since I've been out that are also formerly incarcerated. And the one thing that I will say is that we're like this secret fraternity, right? It's the silent handshake club, but the willingness of some to help is really incredible. That because we've gone through that journey, we know the struggles of a halfway house or the struggles of probation or whatever it might be. And I think that I found overwhelmingly people are willing to help those that are just following behind us so they don't have to endure the same bumps in the road. And it's great for me to be able to spend time with people like you to get your story out there, because on the inside, as I say all the time, all I want to do is make it so that these episodes are about 30 minutes. At the end of a 30-minute episode, the man or woman on the inside that watches this feels just a little bit better, that their day is just a little bit brighter because they heard about somebody that's gone through the same thing that they're struggling through right now and came out on the other side and they're living their life and they've moved on. So I'd like to start with that a little bit. And I know you've got a lot, so I want to really just kind of let you guide this thing. But can I ask you to just share with the men and women on the inside, and of course their families that watch this on the outside, but primarily for the men and women on the inside, just kind of tell us your story and how it got to the point that you and I are sitting here in the Paris hotel having this conversation about what you've been through and what you're doing now.
Well, I think a great place to start is that despite appearances, look at the two of us, right? We look like we fit in with all of these other professionals who are walking the halls here at this conference. And people wouldn't know the time that we've done. And I take great pride in that, right? Because I grew up in the system. I've been on some form of supervision since I was 11 years old. And kind of the big picture story here is that I was sentenced to 213 years in federal prison. Mandatory minimum sentences. I was never supposed to be released. Despite that, I chose to hold on to hope that someday I would be awarded a second chance. And I lived every day as if I was eventually going to walk out that door, which helped me maintain a mindset to not get so caught up in the environment, in the politics, and everything else. I mean, to a degree, you have to be cognizant of your, aware of your surroundings and deal with the day-to-day life in prison. But I always held on to that hope that eventually I was going to walk out the door, that I would have a life. And I do. I have an amazing life right now, and I'll get to that in a moment. I would say there's three key things that allow me to be here today, and that's belief, focus, and discipline. And that belief in myself, I credit that to very early on at a young age. I was involved in highly competitive sports. I played at a fairly high level. I received a high school scholarship to a college prep. And that was one of the things that saved me from getting in more trouble in my youth, but not enough. Like the FBI showed up at my high school as part of a stolen car ring. And for me at the time, when the priest asked them, do you have a warrant? And they're like, no, we want to talk to him. We want to ask him some questions. He said, so you got a warrant, get the hell out of here. The priest told them that. And I'm like, all right. I think that they're looking out for me. It was very self-serving, right? Because shortly thereafter, they're like, you know what? We told them to leave. You need to leave now too. So I ended up leaving that school. And that sent me on a path because it was the one thing that was giving me the structure, kind of just keeping me from going off the rails. And unfortunately, I got caught up in the streets, in the drugs, the alcohol. That led me to my first prison sentence. Just turned 18 years old, got caught up for a string of burglaries, a couple of robberies, ended up in a state prison with a 12-year sentence. Pretty harsh for first offense, even though there was, serious offenses. The judge decided to teach me a lesson. And when I ended up in prison, I saw all of the guys that I had looked up to, the guys who were in the streets, who in the previous years had all gone to prison. And when I got there, it was like a homecoming. They're like, hey, good to see you. You know how it is, guy who's been away for a while and all of a sudden you see him again. And I walked in and was welcomed in that environment. And unfortunately, I had a good reputation in the wrong circles, right? And when I went to prison, I learned more of the things that I guess contribute to being a good guy in those circles. I did my time a certain way, spent a lot of time on the yard. I got my GED. There were no other educational opportunities for me to pursue. Spent some time in a carpentry class where, I got a little bit of a trade, but I wasn't passionate about it. It wasn't something I was really interested in. I did it just because that's what was there. And I took a brief substance abuse class. And that was pretty much it for my time in the state prison. And when I walked out the door 3.5 years later, honestly, I was no better off than when I went in. If anything, I was worse off, right? Now I have a felony conviction. Who wants to hire a felon with no real education but a GED? And if I'm being honest about it, it was a few weeks on that job that a family friend had lined up. On that first bad day, I said, man, F it. And I was off and running. Right back to doing the same things that I had done to lead me to prison in the first place. Caught up with the same guys. And, as we like to say, I had a good run, right? Where I sold a lot of drugs, did a lot of other illegal things that put me kind of in the limelight. Like it looked like I was living a pretty good life. But man, I was so lost. I was so empty. I was so lonely, despite being surrounded by all of these people. I was still looking for something more, and I wanted to get away from that, but I didn't know how. I didn't have anybody around me who could, guide me, really give me the support that I needed. The mental health issues I was having, the substance misuse, those things just really kept pushing me in the wrong direction till ultimately I caught a violation. Had a dirty urine, And I end up back in front of a judge who, again, decides he's going to teach me a lesson. Camden County Jail tells me, I'm going to send you there for 90 days. You're going to stay in for 90 days. That'll straighten you out. Now, back in the late 90s, Camden was like Beirut, right? Like, this is the last place, the last jail you wanted to be in. And you know what happened? I walked in there, same reception. Everybody looked at me. Hey, they know me because I'm a good guy in these circles. Walked right in. It wasn't that difficult. It's prison. It wasn't comfortable, but I'm around people who know me, and it made it a little bit easier. And during that 90 days, I realized how fragile my existence was because my car that was out front was towed, impounded, repossessed in that order. So the car is gone. My phone gets turned off. That's disappeared somewhere. Everything that I was arrested carrying, had on my possession, miraculously disappeared. You know how that happens when you get booked. It's just gone. It's vanished. My house gets sold out from underneath me. My partner was looking out for me and put my stuff in garbage bags and threw it in a warehouse somewhere. And basically everything that I had put aside since I'd been out was gone. I walked out the door 90 days later. This is Jersey in January, freezing cold, flip-flops, bus pants, and a t-shirt. And it gets worse, right? I have a bill for the cost of my incarceration because back then they charged per day for the amount of days that you were in. And I don't remember how much it was, but I looked at the bill. I was like, you got to be kidding me. And I really didn't care. That gate opened and I took off down the street, got to the McDonald's on the corner, and I made another bad choice because the first person I called was one of my guys that I did time with in the state to come pick me up. And over the course of the next 3 weeks, the two of us and a few others committed a string of robberies. And honestly, like, I was in a place of desperation at that point. I wanted to get away. I wanted a fresh start, and I didn't know how to get cleanly. And I robbed a string of illegal businesses or people, connected to that illegal activity because in my, flawed thinking, my immature rationalization of this is that, man, they're all in the game. These people know they're involved in illegal activity. Therefore, they are not victims. They're participants in this, and they should know better. Deeply flawed. Now, let me just be clear. I regret everything that I did that led me to prison. All of that, to my arrest. But when I was arrested, I was put in a position to where they believed I had information on someone, something. And in exchange for that information, for putting someone else in the same place that I was in, facing a life sentence, that's what they wanted from me. I made a personal decision to stand on that and not put someone else, their family, their friends, through what I was going through at that time. That was a decision I made, one that I had to live with. I went to trial, and the government made good on their threat. They told me they were going to give me a life sentence, and they did. I got 213 years out of a 27-count indictment. No chance of parole, no hope of ever being released. Yet, I decided that I wasn't going to give up, that I wasn't going to allow that environment to define who I was. But I had a lot of work to do to really figure out who I was, because as I said, I was completely lost, so alone. And here I am in prison, now more alone than ever. But again, remember, I'm a good guy in prison. So when I show up at the USP, guys are there to welcome me. Welcome back, welcome home, right? It was almost too easy to fall back into the routine of that. Fortunately, I met my first mentor in prison. One of those things that I had been looking for so long, like someone who was living a way that I could aspire to live, who was doing the things that I wanted to do, who I could use as a model for how I wanted to live. That guy's Kevin McTaggart. Um, he's still in prison. He's been in almost 40 years. I think this is year 39. He's an amazing individual who's accomplished some truly remarkable things. And I am forever grateful for him seeing something in me and deciding to carve out space. We all know how valuable real estate is, even more so in prison, right? To get that space to have your workout, routine at a certain time, to have a certain bench, a certain place in the gym. And this guy carved out space for me to come and learn from him, and to allow me to work with him as he facilitated other fitness classes. Ultimately gave me access to the information, to VHS tapes, if you remember what those are, DVDs, books, textbooks, everything on health, fitness, anatomy, physiology, nutrition, and I devoured it. I found what I was passionate about, and I had someone who was feeding me and guiding me into really helping transform my identity from who I was, that guy that everyone welcomed when I walked in the door, to all of a sudden, at some point, it switched to Adam, the fitness guru. Oh, you want to get in good shape? You want to get right? Go see Adam. And people started sending new guys my way. So instead of being responsible for, encouraging people to go down the wrong path, the same path that I had gone down, now I had something to offer. And I felt like for the first time in my life that I was fulfilling my purpose, right? That's a crazy thing to say, that I found that in prison. And with it, honestly, for the first time, I was at peace. I was at peace with myself, with where I was. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't content. I wasn't like overly comfortable. It's prison. It's not comfortable. It's never going to be comfortable, but I was at peace with who I was. And I had resolved to do my part to make things right. And I felt like I had taken so much from so many people. Now that I found that I had this passion for fitness, that I was able to share this with others, help them improve their lives, like that was me doing my part to give back, to kind of balance those scales out, right? To set things straight. And I spent the first a decade through that introspective journey, finding out who I was, cultivating my passion, turning it into my purpose, then teaching thousands of classes, working with countless men to help them transform their lives, and ultimately using the physical challenges that we had in those classes, on the yard, in the gym, to really build the confidence in themselves to become who they were meant to be, because that's what I was able to do for myself. So that was the first part, that belief that I started to have in myself, in my ability. I cultivated that through physical challenge. I challenged myself to do crazy things that I never thought I would do. I hate running. I ran a marathon, 26.2 miles on one of those little oval tracks, just round and round and round for hours, right? Mind numbing, just to prove to myself, not to anybody else, to prove to myself that I was capable. And then I went on to do all sorts of other crazy things that, were really just to continue to build that confidence, to the point where it was almost an irrational belief that I had in myself when I would proclaim that I would one day testify before Congress about the need for radical criminal justice reform. And people are like, dude, you need to worry about getting out of prison first. And I'm like, you got a point, but I'm going to do that. I could see myself doing that. I had that irrational belief in myself, in my abilities, because I had cultivated it through that physical challenge. The second part of that belief was I had to open up and start allowing others to believe in me, to give me that support that I needed. Started with that first mentor. And then a few years later, it's really, I should back up, because in order to allow the things that we need in our life, you got to make space. And part of my process, my growth process, was cutting off all of my past, all the negativity. And that's hard. I got a life sentence, right? And I'm telling people, you know what? I don't think it's good for us to be in contact anymore. And my ex-girlfriend was like, you're telling me you can't talk to me anymore? Like, you're the one in prison. It was just a toxic relationship, right? And I think a lot of us end up in these relationships and we hold on for dear life because we're stuck in a bad situation. But in order to move forward, you got to cut those anchors, right? For yourself and for them. Like, in order for them to move on, you need to give them that opportunity as well. So I was able to let go of that, and it made space for an amazing woman to come in, someone who was already living on the outside the way that I aspired to live, someone who was focused on health, wellness, fitness, like the things that I'm now really interested in that I hadn't been as interested in previously, where like I didn't know anybody else who was living that way. You know, all my friends were partying, getting high, and like I wasn't on that time anymore. And here's this woman who is living the way that I want to live, who, for whatever reason, saw something in me and made a decision that she wanted to invest in building a relationship. Now, I know that's going to sound a little crazy because I was serving a life sentence, and it is. But you got to hear from her why she chose to invest, because um, it wasn't without significant cost, to where she made that determination to become my chief advocate, to be there for me, to believe in me, even more than I believed in myself at times, and to believe in a future that we had for ourselves beyond prison. And she signed up at year 9, and it was at year 10, I get transferred to a medium security facility where I'm going to give you this synopsis here, because coming from a USP down to a medium was a bit of a traumatic experience, we'll say. I was used to things vibrating at this level, and to come down to this level was a bit of an adjustment. Fortunately, crazy thing is, that guy who was my first mentor had come down a few years before and helped guide me through that process as well. Again, I've had some amazing people who've been there to support me, but I also had to allow them into my life to be that support. And that was a hard thing for me. I wasn't used to letting people help. So he helped me make that adjustment. And over the next 10 years, I had the privilege of leading a community of incarcerated coaches. Those of us who chose to invest in a model, in a peer model, where we supported each other, we held each other accountable on a continued process of growth, development, higher learning, where because of that support, it amplified, like it just helped all of us get to the next level and keep pushing forward. And you know how it is. I'm sure you've seen those groups. You look around, you see the guys who are clicked up. They've all got their books, whether they're studying stocks, whether they're studying languages, whatever it is that they're working on. Like, we had a whole environment where everybody was doing that. And we had coaches, including myself, who became certified coaches that had the skills to help everyone else work through that personal development process. And what that did was it transformed the culture in the whole prison, not just with us, but custody, staff, administrators. They couldn't help but notice. They're like, wow, this place has changed. It's different. And everyone liked it that way. It was, well, for the most part, not everybody, most everyone liked it that way, because it made for a better environment. They'd come into work and they'd be like, man, like this place feels different. There's not tension all the time. There's not violence all the time. Like, these guys are all interested in learning. So that experience, becoming a coach, leading a community of men who were all committed to that transformation, like that was a huge part of me finding even deeper meaning in my purpose. That purpose that started with my shared passion for fitness transition. It became about more than just fitness. Now it became about a whole lifestyle, right? Of living a certain way, of really pushing yourself to to fulfill your full potential in every aspect of life. And that's what that community was committed to. To be a part of that was truly extraordinary. And we had people come from all over the country, Department of Justice. All these people were like, we heard about this crazy thing. We got to come see it. And every single one of them left saying the same thing. We don't know what's happening here, but it's something special. And it was a feeling that they left, that they knew that everyone was sincere, that they were invested. So for me, that experience, I knew how significant it was at the time. And when things changed, as you know, administrations change and, a new administration comes in, they feel like they need to make changes and remove things. And they systematically dismantled what we were doing, which was incredibly frustrating for me. But I had been through so many changes. I was able to persevere, stay focused. And remember, I'm, working on 20 years at this point. So I've been doing this a while. I know that, how to endure through those changes. And for a good portion of that time, 2018, finally we had criminal justice reform, the First Step Act, which repealed those mandatory minimums that I had been serving, but it wasn't made retroactive. So it was kind of a cruel twist, right? Like, we won't sentence anyone else, but you can't get any relief. So I was stuck there along with 3,000 others who had these draconian mandatory minimum sentences. But fortunately, I had a pretty amazing attorney who's one of us. His name is Sean Hopwood. He's been on 60 Minutes. He's all over the place. Sean is an amazing individual, an extraordinary attorney who became my chief legal advocate over a decade plus, where he was one of those people who was going to the White House when they were talking about criminal justice reform. He was advocating for us because we couldn't be there. And Sean helped to carve out some of those changes and ultimately helped to get my case back in front of a judge through compassionate release, and went in there and argued during COVID on my behalf that not only because of the changes in the law, but because of everything that I had been able to accomplish while in prison, especially in spite of the fact that I had a life sentence, that I had continued to do all of these things. He used that to advocate for the court to say that this is the reason why I should be granted relief. And ultimately, the judge decided that I had earned that second chance, that he was going to award that to me. And on August 12th, 2020, I was granted compassionate release for extraordinary and compelling reasons. And you can imagine what it was like to get that news, how excited I was to finally have an opportunity to walk out that door, to hold my wife for the first time outside of a visiting room where no one could tell us, hey, break it up. That's enough of that. Truly extraordinary moment. And she had waited 11 years for that moment. I would not be who I am today without her love and support. So very fortunate to have had that. I realize how rare that is. There are a few people who can demonstrate that sort of long-term commitment to any relationship, right? Like, how many marriages under the best circumstances last that long nowadays, right? But my wife is extraordinary, and allowing her to love and support me allowed me to become the person that I was always meant to be. And she picked me up from prison that day. I walked out the door that she had walked in for the better part of a decade, like every other weekend coming to see me. We hopped in the car drove across the country to start a whole new life in Las Vegas, where I now serve as the Director of Innovation and Social Impact for a national nonprofit called Social Purpose Corrections, where our mission is to transform the culture inside of prisons to bring wellness to both staff and residents. And this is based on my experience, on what I experienced that second 10 years, firsthand, what I saw is possible inside of prison, and what I know that by design we can achieve by recreating that environment. Because myself and all of my colleagues who were a part of that, they've all gone on to do amazing things all across this country. They lead nonprofits. They serve in government. They're doing extraordinary things with their lives that is not by chance, it's by design. That's what I advocate for, giving all of us the support, the resources that we need to simply live into our full potential. But it's up to us to take advantage of those resources when they're there, to be willing to open ourselves up to the support when it's offered. There are so many more of us in this space now than there were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. It's because we've all had that experience where someone has supported us, and now we're willing to turn around and make sure that that door is open for you and for everybody else who wants that same support. So I feel it's such an honor to be able to serve in this space, to be able to do what I do. Every morning I wake up with a sense of gratitude that most people will never fully understand or appreciate, but it shouldn't take a life sentence, right? It shouldn't have taken that extreme, weight over me to have caused me to take things more seriously, to invest in myself, to build the right relationships that I knew were going to serve me on this side. And I'm going to be honest with you, it hasn't all been easy since I walked out the door. Let me just be clear about that. I didn't have an ID. I didn't have a social security card. My name 4 years later, despite my success, is still not on my lease. We just renewed and they won't allow me to be on my lease. Those are some of the very real challenges, right? So I don't want you to think that, man, you just do everything right on the inside, it suddenly gets better on the outside. But you have to do the work on the inside to be prepared for when you walk out the door, right? And I invested not only for myself, but for my loved ones, the relationships that I now have, the communication that we developed while I was inside allowed that transition to be smooth. So that when I hit that first bad day on the job, at work, my immediate reaction wasn't to quit. It was like, okay, let me figure it out. What's next? Because I had done that so many times while I was inside. That became deeply ingrained. That became my habit. So the three things that really propelled me, allowed me to be where I am today, are that belief, that seemingly irrational belief in myself, which continues to this day, which puts me in rooms at tables with people that, it's remarkable. Sometimes it's a bit of a surreal experience. And the belief that I've allowed others to have in me. So that belief was one. The second thing is the focus. To remain focused on the vision that I had and still have for my life, right? To get very clear on that and to constantly assess and make sure that I am still on the path that I want to be on, that I am moving forward towards those goals that I've set for myself to help me fulfill the larger vision I have for my life. The third thing is that discipline, and it's a daily discipline. The habits that I formed in prison that I, to this day, 4 years out, still I get up, I go through the same routine, right? I start my day the same way. And getting into those healthy habits, doing something physical, spending some time on prayer and meditation, collecting my thoughts, getting in a positive state of mind to start every single day. That's something I started inside and something continues now. And a practice my wife and I had together which we still do to this day. It's changed a little bit, but it's a focus on gratitude, right? What do we have to be grateful for in that moment, in that day? And what are we looking forward to the next day, which keeps us in that positive state of mind. It's something that we do together that helps to connect us and keep us focused on the amazing life that is ahead of us. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one of the commitments that I made to my wife that kept me motivated every single day to do everything that I could to work toward that eventual release, even when there seemed very little hope, was a commitment to my wife that I would do everything that I could for us to have a family. Neither one of us had any children. We wanted to have children of our own, to start a family. And as we got older, I heard that biological clock ticking, and my wife would remind me of this. A little bit of extra pressure, but we have a 3-year-old son who is, listen, he is everything. And I get emotional just thinking about him. And that's a fulfillment of a commitment that I made to her. He, even before he was here, was something that kept me motivated. So find your motivation, find that thing that is going to continue to propel you forward to do everything that you can every single day that you are in there to become your best self. And I promise you that when you get to the other side, when you get here, we'll be here and others will be here waiting to support you in whatever it is that you want to accomplish in your life. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here to kind of give you a quick bit of my story, and I hope that that inspires some of you to invest in yourself, become your best self as well.
Terrific stuff. I mean, terrific stuff. And I'm honored to be able to bring this to the men and women on the inside. Like to just share a couple of quick things. I had a person that told me right away that, serve each day like you're going to be released tomorrow. And I took that to heart. I don't know why. I was brand new in the system, but so I try to stay active. But I will share this with you from my experience. If you're struggling to find that path on the inside right now, things might seem to be overwhelming. I think the best thing that I did is help others. And so if you're not sure what you want to do, how your life is going to come together, there's all that uncertainty on the inside. We certainly know that. But a new person comes in, they've got that deer in the headlights look, they don't know what's going on, to extend your hand and shake hands with them and let them know that, they'll figure it out, they'll fit in, and to be even not a mentor, but in a moment, an ear that they can bend about their fears about leaving their family behind or their personal safety or whatever it might be. So if that helps, that would be, I think, a way to start to get some clarity of how you want to live your life. So with that having been said, I'd like you to again give the name of your nonprofit. So the family members that are watching this, check out the work Adam's doing to support your loved ones on the inside and then for their release. So would you please share that again?
So the nonprofit that I serve as the Director of Innovation and Social Impact, that organization is called Social Purpose Corrections, socialpurposecorrections.org. But my wife also, through that experience, founded her own nonprofit called Strong Prison Wives and Families. And because, as many of you will know, our families are doing time on the outside, right? They're right there with us. And a lot of times it's harder on them than it is on us. If we're being honest about it, right? So my wife, since her family clearly can understand why she would want to be in a relationship, not only with a guy in prison, but a lifer, she built a community that's over 100,000 strong across social media of other individuals who have an incarcerated loved one. So if your family members are looking for that support, feel like, there's not too many people that they can turn to, that's a great place to look. She continues to lead that community, and it gave her a sense of purpose as well.
That's terrific. So thank you for tuning in to the Path Forward podcast. Thank you, Adam, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Terrific. I loved hearing your story and just watching the passion you have for what you've done and what you're doing. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to our guests and what they have to say. We'll see you next time on the Path Forward podcast.